Good morning, guys. I am making biscuits and gravy this morning with homemade buttermilk biscuits and homemade sausage gravy. I started out with a pound of breakfast sausage. Use whatever brand your family likes. Do not drain the grease, okay? That is going to be what helps us create the roux, which is the base of our gravy. So I went ahead and added 2 tablespoons of butter. And then I added 1/3 of a cup of all-purpose flour. Again, we're going for a roux. That's going to help thicken up our gravy. Once you get that flour nice and incorporated into that grease, just let it cook down. You don't want to taste the flour, so allow that flour flavor to kind of cook out and reduce into your meat, if that makes sense. All right, at this point, we can add our milk. You can do 2 to 3 cups. I recommend starting out with the 2 cups. And if it thickens up too much or if you want it a little bit thinner, go ahead and add that 3rd cup of milk, but it will thicken up. At this point, we can go ahead and season to taste. I'm doing salt, pepper, and a little bit of smoked paprika. I didn't really want to make a full batch of biscuits this morning, so I just did a half batch of my buttermilk biscuit recipe. So I started with a full cup of all-purpose flour. To that, I added about 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda, a full tablespoon of baking powder, and salt. I did about a teaspoon of salt. I also like to add a little bit of sugar just to round out those flavors a little bit. There's the sugar. I swear it's not going to make it sweet, I promise. All right, the butter or fat that you use, this is going to be one of the most crucial and critical steps. You want to make sure you start out with ice cold fat. So in this case, I'm using half a stick of butter, and I stuck it in my freezer about 30 minutes prior to grating it into my flour mixture. You also want to make sure that you mix up that flour mixture before you add your butter. You want to make sure that you mix your flour mixture, all of your dry ingredients, prior to adding your butter. That just makes sure that everything combines properly, everything's homogeneous. All right, this next step is really important also. It goes along with the super cold fat concept. I'm using a pastry cutter. You can use a fork, a whisk, whatever you got. But the goal is to just break that butter up and crumble it into your dry mixture. It's going to look really dry. It's going to look crumbly. That's fine. That's the goal. Once you've hit peak crumbliness, you know you're done. So now you're going to add like half, 1/3 of a cup-ish. You don't want to do too much. And then mix it until just combined. That is so crucial. You do not want to overwork your gluten because then you're going to end up with a hockey puck. Nobody wants that. Next up, flour your workspace and then dump your dough out onto that floured workspace. It's going to look crazy, but trust the process. I promise it's going to come together. You're going to lose a little bit in the process, but that's fine. We're just going to start compacting everything together, and then we're going to get it flattened out. Keep compacting, just keep pushing it all together. It will marry together, I promise. All right, once you get it into this kind of sheet-like shape, you're going to start folding it over onto itself. Do this a few times. That's what's going to create your fluffy layers. Just keep folding and squishing. At this point, you've folded and squished and folded and squished, and you've gotten it well combined. Take a biscuit cutter, cookie cutter, whatever you want to use. I'm just going to cut these into little squares, throw it onto a greased cast iron. Before I put them in the oven, I brushed on a little bit of that buttermilk from earlier. That just helps the tops to get a nice, even golden brown. All right, put them in at 420 degrees for roughly 15 minutes. There you have it, guys. Homemade biscuits and gravy.